Our next speaker from the administration is somebody who I've literally known for decades as a champion of civil rights. He served in a previous administration where he also served on civil rights issues. Our special guest for lunch is Kenneth L. Marcus, and he is the Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Education. He has an extensive background in civil rights law. He most recently served as President and General Counsel of the Louis D. Brandeis Center for Human Rights Under Law. He was previously Staff Director of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights and was delegated the authority of Assistant Secretary of Education for Civil Rights under President George W. Bush. He also previously served as the Lily and Nathan Ackerman Chair in Equality and Justice in America at the City University of New York's Baruch College School of Public Affairs. Mr. Marcus is a graduate from the University of California at Berkeley of Law and Williams College. I'm really delighted before he comes out. I just want to acknowledge that the disability community has not had as smooth a relationship in some cases with his department, and that he has inherited a bit of a rift that he is working on, and that we have an open, good relationship with him and know him to be a person of tremendous integrity and work, and that we are deeply appreciative of the fact that he is here. He is new in his new job as a political appointee of the Trump administration, serving at the pleasure of the president, and I am delighted and honored that he has joined us today. Kenneth Marcus.
Thank you all. As Jennifer says, we have known each other for decades. It is such a pleasure to be here. I've had so much respect for you over the years for your leadership on so many issues. And have been so impressed with what you've built here with RespectAbility and the work that you're doing. It was also an honor to be here with Representative Brad Sherman. I think he may have left, so we can now say whatever we want to about him. But what I'll say is that having known him for some years and worked with him on different issues, I have found him to be an exceptionally energetic, well-informed and thoughtful advocate. So I think it's a privilege to have heard from him. I see other friends here, Bill, Heidi, lots of folks. Good to see you all. My colleague Ole Cantos is here. Some of you may know him. I guess he's on the board of advisors of this organization. This, like many of you, this is what he does on his days off, but these are the sorts of issues he deals with on his days on as well. So it's a pleasure to be working with him and to be with him today. I understand you heard from my colleague Johnny Collette just a little while ago, so I'll have only a few remarks. You may recall that he administers the IDEA for our department, the Department of Education. What I do in overseeing the Office for Civil Rights is to enforce civil rights laws involving issues of disability as well as race, color, national origin, sex, etc. So we are in the law enforcement area. Over time, I have been, I guess, honored to learn from this organization and from Jennifer. One of the issues that, speaking personally, that I have been concerned about are some of the numbers that we see involving the graduation as well as employment rates for people with disabilities. We've seen in recent years for Americans high school graduation rates in the vicinity lately in the 80, 81, 82% rate. But when we're looking at students with disabilities, it's about 20 points lower, as Jennifer just indicated, and that delta, that 20 points, is an area of concern, especially when we know that there are others who are disabled who are also either English language learners or who may be racial or ethnic minorities, and who may therefore be subject to multiple forms of disability. You know, I was discussing this issue recently with some of my colleagues. We have a division that's focused on disability issues, and they made the point, which I think is important, which is that some of the heart of soul of what we do on disability issues involves providing free and appropriate public education for students with disabilities, in the hope that they get the same opportunities that others do, and that this can help them to reach excellence and to achieve the same amount of their potential as everyone else. As we are looking at law enforcement, and I should say I've been there only 3 weeks or so, 3.5 weeks. This is not just the first disability-related organization I've spoken to, this is the first organization of any kind that I've spoken to publicly. And who better? Who better? So what we are able to do, besides simply policy, is to enforce the civil rights laws in cases either proactively or in response to complaints. By way of example, last week we had a complaint that we oversaw in the Midwest, in which a student came to us and told us that the bathroom stalls in her school, the doors were too heavy, the sizes were not appropriate. They had ramps in her school, but the incline was not one that was appropriate or consistent with federal law. And she was literally left behind on various situations, including, perhaps most horribly, in multiple fire evacuation skills. She was simply left behind time and time again. In that case, we've worked with the city and the school district to make sure that that won't happen again, that they will correct the problems with respect to the ramps, that they will correct the problems with respect to the restrooms, and most of all, they will make sure that no one is left behind, either literally or figuratively, and that they will provide safety for all Americans. So law enforcement is a big part of what we do. I think Congressman Sherman was very helpful in giving a few practical suggestions. That's something that would be helpful to you as well. So I can't speak to Congress and lobbying, but a couple things I would say in working with executive branch agencies, if that's of interest. First, it is very helpful to us to get information about schools and districts that are not complying with the law. You know, we like to say that we want to work proactively with institutions to ensure they are compliant in advance. But when they're not, we need to know about it. So if you are aware of problems with schools or colleges or public libraries, please, the Office for Civil Rights is here to receive those complaints, best if they're specific. Best if there is also a student who is harmed by it whom you can identify. If you can't, there are lots of ways or lots of situations in which we can help anyhow. But if there is a student who is harmed, please do let us know. I think Representative Sherman used as an example that there are times that you might want to write to an executive agency. He might even use our agency as an example to urge a particular kind of civil rights enforcement. One thing I would suggest in that is it is very helpful if you have something to bring to our attention for policy to be specific, and especially if there are practical ways that you want to make things better. We get lots of letters from different organizations telling us in very broad or general terms that we should enforce civil rights more actively. What is really helpful is if you can use your knowledge, your experience, your expertise to give us specific examples of things that we ought to be doing, or that schools ought to be doing, or colleges or universities that should be doing. We can't think of everything, so if you are thinking of very specific practical suggestions, that is always helpful to us. So let me say in closing, since I have only been with the government for 3 weeks in this stint, I can't take credit for all the good stuff, but what I can say is this: it is a real pleasure to begin by seeing all of you and by being with you today. I don't know if I can volunteer Oli, but he'll be here, and I'm sure that he wouldn't mind reporting to me any conversations that you have with him. Chelsea Henderson, my colleague is here as well. We definitely are here to support all of our country's students. To the extent that you have any issues involving students, to the extent that you are a student or a parent of a student or an educator or have concerns, we want to hear from you. We are here to serve. I thank you very much, and I wish you the best during your time in this conference.
Can I ask you one question?
Sure.
And here is my one question. Since you're 3 weeks on the job, we have a lot of young leaders who someday would like to have the kind of job that you have. So if you were talking to, and now you are, a group of young leaders with and without disabilities who are thinking about civil rights and advocacy as a career, what advice can you give them so that someday, A, they can be qualified and have an impact, and B, be ready to be Senate confirmed?
Well, thank you for that, and thank you for that comment on Senate confirmation. As Jennifer well knows, I just received the overwhelming support of the United States Senate for my confirmation by a margin of 50 to 46. So you can all decide how much advice you do or don't want to take from me on that score. But I will say the following about the first part of her question, which is young or not so young people who are interested in public service and interested in government positions, which may be Senate confirmed or not. I think it's important to develop the skills that are appropriate. At the Office for Civil Rights, we are hiring now. We'll be looking to hire approximately 65 people. A lot of these are legal positions, not all of them. They're not all in Washington, D.C. But attorneys are probably the #1 position that we hire for our law enforcement function. So I would say develop the appropriate skills, and for our line of work, that means law. And in law, I would say build the broadest possible array of skills. So that's disability law, but also other fields of civil rights law, because there are connections. Civil rights law, but also general law, because you need to look at statutes in the constitutional context, so you need constitutional law. You need to look at the administrative process, so you need administrative law. And I'll tell you that during my time founding and leading a public interest advocacy group, there was really no area of law that wasn't pertinent. So for example, corporations law became important for some of our cases. So what I would say is build the broadest array of skills so that you can be of use. And I'll say another thing about it. There are many different ways that you can be of public service. Certainly I have chosen to work in government. I have chosen to work for think tanks. I established a public interest advocacy group. But there are other ways as well, whether you're in public interest work or whether you're not. When I was with a law firm, we found ways of doing pro bono work. We found ways of serving on the board of directors or other kinds of boards with nonprofit organizations. Whether you choose to go full-time into this sort of work or not, there will be opportunities to be of service to society. And wherever you are and whatever you do, there is a way of making a contribution if you have the will.
Ken Marcus, thank you so much. We
Thank you.
really appreciate it. Thank you so much.